but the more you learn to breathe in appreciation and gratitude, you sort of build a shield. So not only are you feeling good, but you're less likely to absorb other inputs of negativity.
If humans are naturally eager learners, why do so many people dread school? If work is vital to our health and soul, why are so many people miserable with the work they do or avoid work altogether? I'm Terry Novacek, and the purpose of this podcast is to shed light and insight into the importance of discovering, defining, and developing your element. That place where interests and talents collide and the heart, mind, and body work together. Where work and learning bring joy. Where you come to realize your element is everything. Compassion, cognition, creativity, and courage. How can we have them all? Well, you already do. All those characteristics are within you right now. And through brain integration, you can get them all going at optimal speed. Today, we chat with Lisa Blackett, a certified mBiT coach, who shows us how removing the burdens in our heart and the distractions in our mind help us to see more clearly, to make what she refers to as authentic decisions. Our nervous system is always trying to help. But like my Labrador retriever, who is always front and center on any project, just trying to help, you sometimes think, please stop. You are only making things worse. Our nervous system is what controls our anxiety and relaxation, both of which can be of value in small doses, but detrimental if we have too much. When we feel overwhelmed, it may not be because the situation is inherently overwhelming. It may be because our brains are reeling with contradictory insight. We are, in essence, overthinking things. Let's see what Lisa has to say.
And let's just dive right in with what is mBiT and a little bit of the science behind it. And I know in the book it talks about neuroscience, which sounds very futuristic, but then they talk about ancient wisdom.
Yeah, so mBraining is accessing our multiple brains. So I guess to kind of explain the premise behind it is that we have a brain or intelligence in our head and in our heart and in our gut. And that has come about, the understanding of this has come about through a synthesis really of extensive research in neuroscience or neurology, cognitive science, positive psychology, behavioral modeling. And so there's an extensive body of research behind this. And why we say, neuroscience meets ancient wisdom is because a lot of the techniques, a lot of the understanding of the body and the brain actually was known hundreds and thousands of years ago, really. And a lot of traditions that we are, somewhat aware of, like the yogic traditions or Taoism, Buddhism, reference, having a wisdom in our gut or a wisdom in our hearts. So, so that's kind of the idea behind neuroscience meets ancient wisdom. But there is an extensive body of research behind it now.
And so why should I care? As a human being, what do I do with this information? How does it help me? How does it impact
Great question. So how often do you make decisions?
Constantly. You're constantly making decisions, and sometimes you're making more than one decision at a time.
Well, exactly. So think about a decision that you recently made that you were really happy with. What was going on with that decision? Did you just, really want something and kind of listen to your heart, or was it just a gut reaction? You just did it, or, did you carefully think and plan it through?
Well, so what comes to mind for me was the decision yesterday. Do we stay here at the house, or do we put the bikes in the truck and take them down and do a beach ride? And we did a beach ride, and of course it took energy up front, but we were glad we did it. And so a little bit of everything, I guess. I mean, a little bit of planning, but it was really kind of a spur of the moment decision. It's not like we had planned 2 weeks ago to do that bike ride on Sunday afternoon.
Okay, so you used a bit of all of those. You really wanted to do the bike ride. You thought about how you could actually do it. You used some creativity, and then you made the decision and took the action to do it. So you used all three intelligence, the heart, the head, and the gut with that decision. Now think of a decision that didn't go so well, and you don't have to share what it was, but just think briefly about a decision that didn't go so well and think about, did you listen to all of your intelligences?
No. Usually those are decisions that are made very quickly.
So in a way, and it might be an easier way to connect, because I know that the idea of an intelligence in the heart and the gut, as well as the head's a little bit of a leap for some people. But I think we're getting a much greater acceptance broadly of, our cognitive intelligence, our emotional intelligence. I mean, there's a lot about EQ now, as well as our physical or somatic intelligence. And that's another way of looking at it, really. So the head, heart, and the gut also link with, how we feel, the actions we take, and what we think. And if you think about those things, it's really easy to see how one, has an impact on another. So just imagine the strength if those three systems or parts of your own system are actually aligned. So that's what we do with mBraining or mBiT, which is multiple brain integration techniques. We actually guide and teach people how to really listen to their inner wisdom. So listen, your heart, for example, is the part of you that has, it kind of holds your values, what's really important to you, the relationships, what has meaning for you, your purpose, all of that, your ikigai. I don't know how popular that phrase is now in the States, but, what's really important, what gets you out of bed in the morning, what's really important to you. And your head is not just logic, but it's also creativity, problem solving. Okay, this is what I really want to do now. How do I go about doing it? And then your gut is about your identity and your action taking. And, if we put a label on all three of those, we would say your heart is a center of compassion, and your head creativity, and your gut courage. So you need all three of those, really, if you think about it, to make aligned, holistic decisions, take action. And that compassion is for yourself and for others. So you're not only, aligned and congruent with yourself, so you're being kind to yourself when you make these decisions, but also with the greater world.
Now you talk about inner wisdom, and you're mentioning the head, heart, and gut. And a lot of people, even though we use that phrase all the time, follow your gut, we don't like to think of our gut as being our wise part of our body. Can you tell me a little bit more about that forgotten gut?
Yeah. So the gut, or the enteric brain, is actually was discovered as another word for brain might be a complex neural network. So it was discovered as such over 100 years ago. And we know that it has, 500 million neurons in a complex neural network form. And it actually has an intelligence. So if you think about it, when we just kind of have a feeling, we know something's just not right, or something feels good, conversely, we might really notice it in our gut. And there was a book written last century by The Second Brain by Michael Gershon, which shows a lot of the science behind that. And there are several books written since. But the gut is actually the first part of our bodies that's formed, before our head brain and before our heart, when we're in the embryonic state. So, it's really sort of the core of being. And there's a number of different, creatures out there that basically are just guts, like the sea cucumber, for example. So it's really an intuitive sort of base primal intelligence that we have. And it wouldn't be the first place that we go, although sometimes if you're in danger, it is the first place we go, and it's the system that, sends signals up to the brain rather than back down.
It's, there's that saying, you are what you eat, and I bet that kind of plays into that, and that's another episode.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research behind that as well, and how it affects your gut-brain intelligence.
So neuroplasticity, I used to think I was so smart because I knew neuroplasticity, but now it's really becoming a common everyday word, which is very exciting to me because it helps people know, you can change things. Can you tell us a little bit about how that plays into your head, heart, and gut?
Yeah. So yes, the idea is that, you can change what you do by, learning a new pattern, creating a new pattern, getting rid of old patterns. It kind of fits in with that whole growth mindset, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And how it plays a role in the mBraining is it means that we can kind of change our way of being. So as I was saying, the gut has, 500 million neurons and is a complex neural network, and the heart also is a complex neural network. And we can actually influence those. So for example, there's research to show that people with really positive, happy outlook have considerably more neurons in their heart when they die than those who might have been described as, unhappy or grumpy or really, an unkind person. So it shows that with positive reinforcement and, positive engagement, you can increase the number of neurons in the neural network in your heart. And same with the gut. The gut has memory. You can have the same sort of neural patterns. And again, if you repeat behaviors and learn new ways of being, it can change. So instead of being sort of a place where the fear sits in and you freeze, it can learn to be more courageous and, with the support of your heart and your head brain, take more courageous action, for example.
You just made me think of something that we all feel more comfortable when we feel like we have a team and we're not operating alone. And when you talk about your head, heart, and gut, don't forget heart, you've got two other buddies here. Or don't forget gut, you've got,
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, I know that breathing, it becomes very important when you're doing your sessions with people. Tell me why.
Excellent question. Breathing, if I can do nothing else for somebody, breathing is the first thing that I will share with them. Because if you learn to breathe in a balanced or coherent way, you're able to tap into your heart and your gut as well as your head brain better. And the reason for that is because by balancing your breathing, you actually are able to tap into your autonomic nervous system. So our autonomic nervous system, of course, is what keeps everything going. So we don't have to think about breathing or our heart beating or our kidneys functioning. It's all done automatically, but we can actually influence it by breathing. And there are other ways to influence the autonomic nervous system, but breathing is the one that I work with, and I think it's the easiest to understand. So there's a considerable body of research out there about breathing, coherent breathing, the heart math site, and they've got a lot of research around it. James Nestor just came out with an exquisite book on called Breath. And where this ties in with mBraining is by accessing the autonomic nervous system, balancing it so we're not in sympathetic, which people would associate like with fight, flight, freeze, sort of the more anxious, tense state. And the other side of the autonomic nervous system is the parasympathetic, which is more the rest and repose and relaxed state. In order to access the autonomic nervous system, you want to balance between those two. And you're able to do that by diaphragmatic breathing. So that's actually, it's a muscle you can't intentionally engage, but it's just above the tummy and below the rib cage, just in that space there. But using the diaphragm to breathe rather than the chest muscles and the shoulders, which is what so many of us do, using the diaphragm and breathing slowly, more slowly than we're used to. I think a lot of us will probably, take at least, 18 breaths in and out in a minute, at least. It's slowing it down to 12 if possible, and even longer is good. So it would be having equal breaths in and back out through the diaphragm and through the nose until you get this sort of really even wave-like pattern. And what that actually does is creates a coherent heart rate variability, which is basically the space between the heartbeats. So it's not your overall count, but it's the variability between the beats. And the more even that is, the more coherent or balanced you are, and the more you're able to listen to the wisdom inside your body. So you can, you could even do this breathing and put your hand on your heart and just say, hey, heart, what do you have to share about this decision? And it's something also that can help you, just be less stressed generally, to, cope with a difficult meeting coming up. You could breathe like that for a few minutes. So the breathing is key.
Right.
And that's how we learned, that's how we're able to tap into our head, heart, and gut.
I guess you could kind of equate that to trying to have a conversation between three people in a very noisy environment.
Excellent. Yeah. Really good analogy. Yeah.
The breathing helps shut out the noise.
Very
Yeah.
good.
I know you've worked with teens. I've heard you talk about working with teens with test anxiety, parents with child challenges, or just even balancing their own lives, professionals struggling at work, unemployed that are looking for work. Are there any stories that kind of rise to the top for you as far as feeling like this was a real game changer for somebody that you've worked with?
Quite a few times, actually. The most recent was somebody I was working with, and it came later, actually, not even during our sessions. But we had done the techniques of it, and we were working on quite a few things. And a couple of weeks later, I heard from this person, and they said, well, I listened to my head, heart, and gut, and I left that job. So it had been a process, and because it doesn't always happen overnight. And actually, the gut, because it's the center of courage, can take longer to make that decision. I think during our sessions, we knew it was clear that this person wasn't happy, that it wasn't her calling, as it were. But there's a lot of considerations, obviously financial considerations and all these things. But listening to herself over and over and over, she just came back and said, you know what? I left. And conversely, I've also had people who have taken jobs. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Well, so then that same person, was there a chance to follow up later was that really the best thing to do and things went in a better direction for her overall?
Yes, actually, was looking for work after that, but had, a background now that she knew exactly what she wanted, and she wasn't going to settle for something that was going to make her inherently, unhappy or stressed every day at work. And yeah, it was absolutely the right decision. The stress was costing her quite a bit. I work a lot in healthcare and with healthcare professionals who are quite often off on stress. And, it may be that they need to change jobs, or that there's something else they can do within that realm. And this idea of actually listening to what's important to them and learning that self-compassion can be quite a new thing. And I'm sure it's the same in education as well. We're so used to looking after the pupils and the families, or looking after the patients, or, all of these people are the focus, and you've kind of gone into these careers because you care, but lost your own, self-compassion along the way. So being able to go back to your heart and going, what's really, really important to me? What's my purpose? Why am I doing this? Can give you a chance to either refresh what you're doing or change what you're doing. And with the students, I often will just run workshops a whole hour just on the breathing. And the reason is because the breathing, in balancing the autonomic nervous system, means that the student is able to take themselves out of that anxious state, which when we're feeling anxious, when we're stressed like that, we go into fight or flight. But what happens too is we get this flood of cortisol and adrenaline, and the cortisol kind of stops the prefrontal cortex, or the logical brain, from working. And so whatever knowledge they've accumulated in the last 6 months before the exam goes out the window, because the body thinks they have to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. So all that cortisol means, oh, I'm in danger. And we haven't evolved to the state in humanity that we can really differentiate between real and perceived danger. So if the cortisol releases, then we go into the state of not being able to recall information, of being confused, of being, just in that whole brain fog thing. So if you can get people to understand the physiology behind it, it's not to say that, taking an exam is going to be fun, but the autonomic nervous system balance allows you to get out of that fight or flight and recall your information. So it's hugely beneficial.
So we're talking about things, like taking a test, that type of stress, and quitting a job. Mm-hmm. I'm a teenager going on a first date, or meeting a group of friends for the first time, going to a new school. What would be a process that would help me psych myself up or prepare myself for that?
Well, personally, I would do the breathing on a regular basis. So your baseline resilience improves, so you don't get stressed as quickly or as easily. So if you did the breathing 5 to 20 minutes a day, or 5 minutes 2 or 3 times a day, you'd build up that resilience. So your baseline would be better. And then before, you go to any sort of either date or group meeting or whatever, to practice that breathing. And, you can enhance it with, sort of compassionate breathing or heart breathing, really breathing into the heart space, putting your hand on your heart, and really thinking about positive things like appreciation. Learn to breathe in appreciation and gratitude. When I explain it to young people, I often use the Harry Potter metaphor of a Patronus. You're not only, building that resilience and balance yourself, but the more you learn to breathe in appreciation and gratitude, you sort of build a shield. So not only are you feeling good, but you're less likely to absorb other, inputs of negativity. And actually, that's another, science-based physiological fact, that the heart has the greatest electromagnetic field, and the more positive we feel, the higher that resonance and the more it influences. So even though, we feel like, oh, maybe we can catch bad moods and negative attitudes, actually, if we work on really strengthening our own positive feelings, we can deflect them and have more of a positive influence on others. So it's a really positive practice. And I guess the other thing too about really learning to tap into your heart as well as your head and your gut is to become more authentic. You're aligned, you're congruent, and your decisions and your actions become more authentic. So, how often have we done something that our heart wanted to do at the moment, but later, we regret it on one level or another? Or conversely, you could take this organizationally too. How often do organizations make head-based decisions, which would be the financials, without tapping into values, compassion, ethics, and so on? So it's not just individual. Organizations should be mBraining as well. Starting with the why, starting with the values, and then going to what's possible, and then taking compassionate action.
Well, we even talk about generations of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's if you think about it, it's, we're all a system, whether we're an individual or whether we're at an organization or a family. If we all take into account our heart, our values, what's important, and compassion for ourselves and others, and then with that knowledge, think about what problem solving or logic can be used, or creativity, and then taking that wisdom from both the heart and the head, and checking in with the gut. Is that okay? Does that work? You're ready to do it, and taking courageous action.
Are there the certified coaches, are they able to do it virtually these days?
Yeah. So if people were interested to learn a bit more, I mean, the first thing I would do is pick up a copy of the mBraining book. There's a lot of techniques in there that people can use for themselves, a lot of learning. There's also, a website, the mbraining.com website, which ties into the book. So there's some guided exercises on there.
Righty, great. Anything else that you feel would be really valuable for listeners to know?
Yeah, really, when you've got a decision or a challenge or a difficult conversation coming up, do take the time and get yourself into balanced breathing. It can change everything. We talked about neuroplasticity a little bit, but I don't breathe any other way anymore. I only breathe via, my diaphragm through my nose all the time. So it just becomes a way of being, and we really can change our way of being and listen to all this, incredible wisdom we have inside ourselves.
I love that. Lisa, thank you very much. It was great to chat with you.
My pleasure, Terry. Thank you.
When I think of brain integration decision-making, I think of one of my favorite sayings: give a man a fish and he eats for a day, teach a man to fish and he eats for a lifetime. Decision-making is the same. Making decisions for others or having others make decisions for you only gets you through that one decision. But the more you make your own decisions, the better you get at it. And by integrating your brains in the process, you find you're making more sound decisions. When the reason why you want something aligns with what you know to be true, it is much easier to act and to know how to do it. For our Reflect and Connect activity, we're going to work on building coherent breathing skills. Breathe in for a count of 4 and out for a count of 4. If you feel like you need more or less time, then you can make the adjustment. What's important is that you have the same time for both. In for 4, out for 4, or in for 5 and out for 5. Do this for at least 2 minutes at a time. Practice breathing into your heart. No ribs, no tummy. Breathe through the diaphragm. Hold your hands over your heart as you breathe and think thoughts of appreciation and gratitude. Feel love for yourself, because self-compassion is the key to your best decisions. As Lisa pointed out, if we work on strengthening our own positive feelings, we can deflect negativity and have a positive influence on our own decisions as well as others. If you are interested in experiencing the rest of the mBiT process, check out the Element is Everything website for resources. And when you start with the heart and align your thoughts with what you know and what you're willing to do, you'll find a path taking you to that place where you find your element.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Element is Everything. If you found anything in this podcast worth knowing, please share it with a friend, teacher, business leader, or other decision maker. If you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening now to be notified of future episodes. We appreciate your suggestions and feedback, which you can provide through the Element is Everything website under Contact, or you can simply email elementiseverything@myelement.org. Will this podcast change the world for the better? Not likely. But if we can help just a few listeners discover the path to their element, who will then help just a few others do the same, that will be a step in the right direction. Remember to live life to the fullest. Live life in your element.